Many pet parents have the concern that their dog is struggling with canine anxiety. Today we're going to talk about some ways that we can help manage that for them. Hi, I'm Sarah Zimmer. Welcome to Kong Classroom. Canine anxiety presents itself in a lot of different ways. One of the common ways that we see it is things like inability to settle on their own, so restlessness, pacing, panting. And we're not just talking about like panting because we played fetch with them or they saw something exciting, but if they're just sitting there in their house panting, unable to kind of, sleep, dogs sleep 16 hours a day on average. So if your dog is unable to really engage in settling behaviors on their own, then that's a good sign that they are not feeling settled and therefore are feeling some sort of canine anxiety. Some other forms of canine anxiety that we can see that are a little bit more obvious are things like being really startled. So things like if they are easily stimulated by people that walk by, the house, if they are barking excessively, whining excessively, if they can't really seem to be quiet, they are having a hard time keeping in their anxiety. That vocalness is actually the anxiety coming out. A great time to actually give your enrichment toy or your stimulating snack to your dog is actually before the trigger shows itself. So for instance, if your dog is scared of thunderstorms, we want to give them that enrichment toy or that stuffed Kong before they actually hear the thunder. But not so soon that the Kong is gone or the toy is gone or it's no longer has stuffed full of food before the thunderstorm is over. So we kind of want to time it just right. We want to keep them under what's called threshold. When a dog goes over threshold, they are no longer in a learning space and they're really tunnel visioned in on what is causing that anxiousness inside of them. So our goal is to always keep our dogs under threshold for that reason. So what we want to do is give them that toy before the trigger is present, and then we want to keep them engaged in that toy during the extent that they are exposed to that trigger. We know that our dogs are over threshold when they start to exhibit signs that they can't listen to us. So if we are trying to get their attention and they're not responding to typical cues that they normally do, like sit or stay or down, whatever those typical cues are, or if they're really exhibiting going back to some of those stress signals. So it's heavily panting, not being able to settle down, circling on the leash, even things like barking, lunging, and essentially biting too. All of these behaviors are things that are happening when your dog is no longer in a learning brain. When it comes to overcoming your pet's anxiety, I like to stick to the 3 S's. So first, you're going to want to start with a safe space. A safe space is an area that you can take your dog that they are away from the trigger, that they are not in an anxious state. So we want to keep them out of being triggered. That can look like keeping them in a different room if they are stimulated by visitors coming over, or if they're really anxious when we go to the vet, having some predictability and some consistency behind that visit. So always going to the same vet, always going to the same room, having lots of treats, and you can even do this multiple times over the course of their year or their life so that they feel comfortable walking into the vet, and it's not always something that always predicts that they are going to get a shot or get an exam. It's just simply something that's fun. Next, we want to move on to something with soothing sounds. So that can be one of the really great things for dogs is things like classical music. There's also been recent studies that suggest that reggae music is something that our dogs really enjoy. So if you like an alternative to classical, reggae is a good option there. You can also use things like white noise machines or even nature sounds like a nice bubbling brook or a waterfall or something along those lines. So lastly, we want to offer them some stimulating snacks. Offering dogs food toys or enrichment toys are great ways to lower overall anxiety. One of the ways that I often work with my clients is to actually prescribe them a nice stuffed classic Kong. The great thing about a classic Kong is you can stuff it full of your dog's favorite treat. So that can be things like peanut butter, or it can be things like canned dog food, whatever it is that they enjoy. You can even just simply soak their kibble in water and make that a nice little option for them. And what I like to do is throw it in the freezer. That makes it a lot more long lasting, a lot more interesting for them to engage in. And getting them involved in that consistent licking, consistent sniffing, consistent chewing. Again, those are all 3 things that are going to naturally lower your dog's overall stress levels. I'm Sarah Zimmer. Thanks for joining us in Kong Classroom.